Che Guevara, the man, the myth, the revolution. Ernesto. Che Guevara is one of the most recognizable and controversial figures of the 20th century. To some, he is a heroic symbol of resistance, revolution, and justice. To others, he is a ruthless militant responsible for violence and repression. Decades after his death, his face remains one of the most reproduced images in history, appearing on flags, posters, T-shirts, and murals around the world. But who was Che Guevara really? What shaped his beliefs, his struggle, and his legacy? This is the full story of Che Guevara, his life, ideology, achievements, failures, and the lasting impact he left on the world. Early life and background. Che Guevara was born on June 14, 1928, in Rosario, Argentina. His full name was Ernesto Guevara de la Serna. He was born into a middle-class family with progressive political views. From a young age, Ernesto suffered from severe asthma, a condition that caused him intense pain and limited his physical abilities. However, instead of weakening him, this illness strengthened his mental resilience and determination. Che was an intelligent and curious child. He loved reading books, especially philosophy, history, poetry, and political theory. He was deeply influenced by writers like Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, Sigmund Freud, and later Vladimir Lenin. Despite his illness, he enjoyed sports, particularly rugby, and earned a reputation for toughness and discipline. He later studied medicine at the University of Buenos Aires. His decision to become a doctor was driven by a desire to understand human suffering and help the poor. The journey that changed his life. In 1951, Che embarked on a motorcycle journey across South America with his friend Alberto Granado. This journey would completely change his worldview. As he traveled through Argentina, Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela, Che witnessed extreme poverty, social injustice, and exploitation. He saw miners working in brutal conditions, indigenous people treated as second-class citizens, and entire communities lacking access to healthcare and education. One of the most impactful experiences was his time working in a leper colony in Peru, where he treated patients who were isolated and forgotten by society. This journey convinced Che that poverty was not an accident, but a result of political and economic systems. He began to believe that only radical change, revolution, could bring justice to oppressed people. These experiences were later documented in his famous book, The Motorcycle Diaries, Political Radicalization and Marxism. After completing his medical degree, Che continued traveling and became increasingly politically radical. In Guatemala, he witnessed the overthrow of a democratically elected government backed by foreign interests. This event deeply angered him and reinforced his belief that imperialism was the root cause of suffering in developing nations. During this time, Che fully embraced Marxism. He believed in class struggle, the abolition of capitalism, and the establishment of a socialist society where wealth and power were shared equally. It was also in this period that he earned the nickname Che, a common Argentine expression meaning friend or mate. Beating Fidel Castro. In 1955, Che met Fidel Castro in Mexico. Fidel and his brother Raúl were planning to overthrow Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista, whose regime was corrupt, brutal, and heavily supported by the United States. Che joined Castro's revolutionary movement as a doctor, but soon proved himself as a disciplined fighter, strategist, and leader. In 1956, Che and around 80 revolutionaries sailed to Cuba aboard a small boat called Granma. Most of the group was killed or captured shortly after landing. However, Che and a small group survived and retreated to the Sierra Maestra Mountains, where they launched a guerrilla war. The Cuban Revolution. Che Guevara played a crucial role in the Cuban Revolution. He trained fighters, led military campaigns, and promoted strict discipline within the rebel forces. He believed that revolution required sacrifice, loyalty, and unwavering commitment. One of his most famous victories was the capture of the city of Santa Clara in 1958. This decisive battle led to the collapse of Batista's regime. On January 1, 1959, Fidel Castro took power and the Cuban Revolution was successful. Che Guevara had become an international revolutionary figure.
Role in post-revolution Cuba. After the revolution, Che held several key positions in the Cuban government. He became the head of La Cabaña prison, where former regime officials were tried and executed. This period remains one of the most controversial chapters of his life. Later, Che served as Minister of Industry and President of the National Bank of Cuba. His signature famously appeared on Cuban banknotes simply as Che. He worked to transform Cuba into a socialist state, nationalizing industries and promoting economic equality. However, his economic policies were not very successful, and Cuba faced shortages and inefficiencies. Despite his power, Che lived modestly and rejected luxury. He believed leaders should live like the people they served. Ideology and beliefs. Che Guevara believed in the creation of what he called the new man, a person driven not by money or personal gain, but by moral duty and collective responsibility. He rejected capitalism, consumerism, and individualism. He believed armed struggle was a legitimate tool against oppression, and that revolution should spread globally, especially in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. However, critics argue that his ideology ignored human rights, justified violence, and failed to account for economic realities. Leaving Cuba and global revolution. Despite his high status in Cuba, Che felt dissatisfied. He believed true revolution could not be limited to one country. In 1965, he left Cuba secretly to support revolutionary movements abroad. He first went to the Congo, but the mission failed due to internal conflicts and lack of discipline among local fighters. Later, Che traveled to Bolivia, hoping to ignite a continent-wide revolution. However, he underestimated the challenges. He lacked support from locals, faced poor communication, and was constantly pursued by Bolivian forces backed by foreign intelligence. Capture and execution. On October 8, 1967, Che Guevara was captured by the Bolivian army. He was wounded, exhausted, and surrounded. The next day, on October 9th, he was executed without trial in a small schoolhouse in the village of La Higuera. His last reported words were calm and defiant, showing no fear of death. Che was 39 years old. Legacy and controversy. After his death, Che Guevara became a global icon. His image symbolizes rebellion, resistance, and revolution. For many young people, he represents standing up against injustice and oppression. However, others see him as a violent extremist responsible for executions and failed ideologies. His legacy remains deeply divided. Che Guevara was neither a simple hero nor a simple villain. He was a complex figure shaped by his time, beliefs, and experiences. Conclusion. Che Guevara's life raises powerful questions about justice, power, violence, and morality. He dedicated his life to fighting what he believed was injustice, and he paid the ultimate price for his ideals. Whether remembered as a revolutionary hero or a controversial militant, one thing is certain: Che Guevara changed history and continues to inspire debate across the world. His story reminds us that ideas can outlive people, and symbols can become stronger than reality. For more powerful stories from history, subscribe to Legacy by MAO. Your support truly matters.